I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just again, now that we're recording, this is the Community Preservation Committee regular meeting. It's Thursday, December 21st. We're live at the Primetime Building, available via Zoom, and this meeting is being recorded and can be viewed at a later date on the Town of Dayton YouTube channel. We'll start off with committee member introductions. I am Kevin Smith, Chairman and Parks and Recreation Representative.
Alicia Wilson, Vice Chair and at-large member.
Brian Cedrone, at-large member.
Pat Gales, Historical Commission.
Dan Higgins, Planning Board Representative.
Paul Reynolds, Conservation Commission Representative.
Thank you all. So the first thing we have is review, discuss, and act meeting minutes from August 17th, 23 and October 19th, 23. Did you guys get the ones I sent out for August?
Yeah.
So Elizabeth has had quite a bit going on, and then she couldn't join us tonight because she had a family obligation. So she's she didn't have those prepared for us, but we can do August. We'll just have to continue October's until January's meeting. So unless if anybody has any revisions that they see need to be made. Oh, one thing too, I'm gonna run the summary on the Zoom. So when we make motions and seconds and stuff, if you could just say your name and then make the motion, because it will record it into the notes. That'd be kind of helpful for Elizabeth when she catches up as well. So do I have a motion?
Alicia Wilson, motion to approve meeting minutes from 8/17.
Second, Brian Cedrone.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Next we have financial reports. Dave Eckerson is not with us this evening, or at least not yet. But we can go. Nothing has changed as far as our balances are concerned. This might be him. There he is. Dave. You're right on time. We're just gonna do financial report.
There you go. You have no update either.
So the only update that I have, and actually I had spoken to Paul about this as his role as town treasurer, was our statewide, the allocation that we get from the state. And I don't know if it hasn't been recorded into our books yet. However, it does show that we have what we're going to receive, and it might just be a clerical thing at this point. But our matching funds from the state for this year, which should have went out in November. Let's scroll through and find it. So on top of our local funds collected, this year's match from the state was $29,078. So it's down a little bit, which is kind of just a reflection of what this Community Preservation Coalition had kind of echoed to us, that receipts are down with the Registry of Deeds and everything. And also too, there was last year it was I think last year's match was 49,000. The year before was 51, but there was some additional funding as part of the statewide budget that was allocated for CPA communities, and that did not happen this year. So seeing a little bit lower match this year, but it's still, I think it was 21.02% of what our local collection was. So we have that we'll see reflected in our balances once the books are reconciled to that point. I think that's really all we have as far as updates for financial reports. So we'll jump right into old business, which was review, discuss, and act the local CPA bylaw, return of unused funds and canceled projects. and then also the correspondence from the coalition with the Department of Revenue recommendation. Let me just pull that up quick. I did send that along to all of you. I think you guys all saw it. And it kind of, it plays into, I think, what we had previously discussed. So I had asked the question, what do we do in this circumstance where we have the funds from the grant? And then they actually added this to the coalition's website under their technical data, is that, so the Department of Revenue has advised that leftover funds, or in this case where it would be grant funding, be returned to the most restricted account first, and then the remainder gets returned to the less restricted accounts. So in their example that they had allocated 20,000 for a project, 5,000 came from historic, 15,000 came from their undesignated fund. So you would give the full 5,000 back, and then the balance would go to. So we have that similar situation because we had asked that. So what we can do, and we'll talk about a little bit more in the next item about the logistics of that funding. But what we can do is like we had talked about, fully reimburse the historical reserve, and then the remaining balance will go to.
I don't think they want it all to go back into the unrestricted one to the detriment of the other.
Well, I think that was the point, is
Funds,
because
yeah.
you're so limited to what you can use
Right,
that specific fund on,
Yeah.
that it's the best practice to give it back. Does anybody have any questions or anything on that? It's pretty cut and dry and simple. So yeah, so we'll go right into item B under old business, which was the 207 Main Street Library Building Project and the award of the Mass Cultural Council grant, logistics of the grant, and redistribution of funds. So we kind of covered redistribution of funds under that correspondence from the coalition. I did reach out to Town Administrator Mullen and the Town Accountant Serena Amaral just to ask the question of where we're at with receiving those funds and the logistics. I also CC'd Alicia and Dave on it as well, and asking, is it a reimbursement grant? Is it a grant that we draw from? And so I'll just read this correspondence that I received from Administrator Mullen. He said, thanks for reaching out on this. A few of us spoke after the Library Building Committee meeting on Monday evening and discussed the importance of creating a regular process partnership with the CPC to have all of us in the same loop on the library building project moving forward. To answer your question specifically, we do not yet know how the grant funds from the Mass Cultural Council will come to the town and this project because we aren't fully contracted with MCC on this project. Chairman O'Connor and I have completed a few of the initial steps with MCC. We recently had our grant match certified, but there are a few additional perfunctory steps in the process that we are currently working to complete. We will be sure to keep everyone in the same loop on this moving forward. That being said, at the Library Building Committee meeting on Monday night, we were also joined by Chris DeFilippo from MMT, our new architect for the project. Chris will be working with us on draft construction plans and documents with updated cost projections, including prioritizing the HVAC project. So we have that designed and engineered to get that out to bid. Once we get to that point, probably mid-spring, and before we expend any CPC or MCC funds, I think we'll have a better idea and should have a broader discussion with representatives from the CPC about where we are with the HVAC project and all anticipated CPC budgeted costs to bring this project to fruition. I hope this makes sense, and as always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Sincerely, Mike. So we're still like a little ways off before we'll know. I think it was just important to know where we're at. Like later in the agenda, we have, another project from Dayton Trails coming up. So just to give us a better reflection of what our true balances is, so we still can't rely on that 200,000 because it's not back in our account yet. So, but it very well may be by the time we get to town meeting if we do have additional projects that come before us. So it looks like there's just a little bit more on the paperwork end as far as our collaboration with Mass Cultural Council. So we'll keep everyone updated as that progresses. Anyone have any questions on that?
So it sounds like it's a matter of a few months.
Yeah, well, yeah, as soon as they enter contract for that portion of the project, which is HVAC, which is what we allocated the funds for, then we'll have the answer of, they'll receive the contract from Mass Cultural Council, which will outline whether or not it's a reimbursement grant, and which at that point too, the town will have a discussion whether they're gonna utilize the CPC funds that we allocated and reimburse them, or if we'll use the town's general fund and reimburse them, or if it's a draw from grant, then all that money automatically just comes back to us. It's literally just moving it from one column to another because it hasn't gone anywhere yet. And then they'll draw off of the actual grant, like we'll be awarded it as a full dollar amount from MCC. Anyone have anything else? All right, so under new business, review, discuss, and act, Dayton Trails Committee application for eligibility. I'm gonna just screen share and pull that up too. Yeah, let me go back to that. Find it. I pulled everything up and got it in my queue of downloads, and then I started like looking at a bunch of other stuff because I got here too early. Okay, so we have an application for eligibility for the Broad Cove Nature Trail Boardwalk Project preliminary design. So this is just the cover sheet from Mr. Cavallo. And it does fall under open space and recreation. I'll just pull up the and that thing just does not. Did anybody else have trouble downloading the Word doc? I did.
PDF.
The Word was the only one I didn't have trouble. Then you fixed the other two. I mean, I have it here if you want it.
I just got it. I just want to pull it up on the screen so it's in my recording too. All right. So, on behalf of the Town of Dayton Trails Committee, I'm writing to you to request funds in the amount not to exceed $148,500 for the proposed Broad Cove Nature Trail Boardwalk Project preliminary design. This proposal, if awarded, will fund the design and permitting of elevated boardwalks approximately 0.3 miles in length, connecting the Broad Cove Nature Trail west entrance and north existing trail loop to an observation platform structure in the center of the Broad Cove Nature Trail, Platform 5. The boardwalk is necessary to allow access to the observation platform while preventing foot traffic on the sensitive salt marsh areas surrounding much of the Broad Cove salt marsh area. The Broad Cove Nature Trail is part of the larger Taunton River Trails regional network, a 22+ mile multi-modal network that includes connection to an ongoing project currently being designed by the Horsley Witten Group design team under a contract with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. The Dayton portion of the Taunton River Trail is a 2-mile trail that will be constructed in the town of Dayton along the existing railroad right-of-way, starting at the Somerset Town Line and eventually working north through Dayton to Taunton. Trails Committee reached out to HWG to provide an estimate of support to better inform the team before presenting to the CPC. The total estimate of $148,500 was broken down as follows. So there was $91,000 in labor fees, wetland delineation and report was $10,000, permitting was $14,000, geotechnical observation and analysis was $12,000, preliminary boardwalk and foundation design was $55,000. And then in expenses, there was $57,500 total, $30,000 for survey, $25,000 for borings, and $2,500 for printing, mileage, and mailing. This proposal, if funded, will meet recreational open space needs in the town of Dayton to include supporting multiple active and passive recreation uses, serving a significant number of residents through accessible features, expanding the range of recreational opportunities available to Dayton, providing opportunities for passive recreation and environmental education, provide connections with existing trails or potential trail linkages, and preserve scenic views. Then he also included a couple depictions of the proposed trail, which you can see there is the green line, and then there's platform 1, platform 5, and platform 2 out on the other end. And then this is the Dartmouth Natural Resource Trust, which is an example of the type of walkways that will be constructed to be able to pass across the salt marsh. At this point, I mean, the funding part of it is not something that we really need to delve into because we just need to approve the application for eligibility. Mr. Cavallo had he had the same family obligation that Elizabeth had tonight. It's corresponding.
When you face that way, I can't read your lips.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Not your fault.
I was just saying that Mr. Cavallo had family obligations tonight, so he couldn't be with us, but we're really just determining eligibility of the project this evening. We're not really talking.
I thought you'd like to see a pretty face from.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he told us nobody was coming, so we're glad you could make it.
Well, I just stopped on my way home.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything that you'd like to tell us about the project, you're more than welcome to.
Okay. Well, you're giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, if you want to tell us a little bit about it, you're more than welcome to, but at this point, we're not really gonna delve into the funding portion or any, that will be in our next meeting, but.
No, it's just, it's a unique opportunity, no one else has a marsh like we have, with that super stone, growing up in the middle of it. And for, 35 years now, I've been picking away and buying little pieces of it. I shouldn't say when I was with the Conservation Commission, I purchased with conservation money, a lot of them little pieces of land, and finally I got enough together, to do a project like we proposed. I've only been working on it 35 years, so I would love to see something. And it's, well, I can't commit the IT school to it, but they're extremely interested in the project and would like to make it part of, what is it? There's two programs up there they have at the new school. One is environmental engineering, and the other one is environmental management. Both them programs would love to incorporate.
No, it would be a great opportunity for them to participate.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not only that, but my grandson is a junior in the same program.
Excellent.
And he helped me put the crossbar nests up and that sort of stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for a town, and it does, I do quite a bit of work out in the Dartmouth area, and I see how much utilization that whole, like specifically like the Allen's Pond area, I'm out there a lot, and there's a lot of foot traffic that goes through there, and it's a great opportunity for people to be able
It's a
to.
learning experience. Okay.
Thank you very much. I mean, it certainly is eligible. We talked about this during the previous application, which was withdrawn. I think I have questions more on once we get to the application for funding this, I have a pretty active list of questions.
We're talking about the map tonight.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you're welcome to.
What is I put probably,
So I can blow this up.
now, is platform one there now?
Yes.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, so if you
Platform
park,
one is there.
if you park in the west entrance, you
I'm
can.
pretty familiar with it, I just couldn't, I've walked over.
When you park, you can see the platform one from the parking area.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
platform two is also.
Yes,
Yeah, so this would connect the platform from the 138 side essentially with the platform over on the Hart Street side, is that right?
correct. As far as their,
Is it gonna make it all the way there, because the green line kind of stops out there? Or is that high enough ground that you don't need the boardwalk there?
Right.
There's some low spots though.
And then how does platform 5, is that also a trail?
so he does, hold on, let me zoom back out.
That green line goes to where the bench is right now, right, into the woods where the trail comes into the marsh. Is that where that green line dead ends now?
No, I think the bench is actually more in here. Cause like if you walk in now, you can walk along this and then there's the trail that goes
Yeah.
out to the edge, to the orchard. And then there's also the loop that comes back through and the bench is right in here.
Yes, yeah, if you go, if you take a left in from the 138 entrance and cut across, right across that first stream, then that's where that first bench is. And ironically, as soon as I saw that Broad Cove was on the agenda tonight, my very first thought with it was that it would be great if we could get Mr. Frenette's perspective on this. So it's a pleasant surprise to see him there tonight.
Paul was just saying he's happy that you were here to provide some input. Cause he said if anybody knows, if anyone knows about it, it's you. So he does say in the description though, so if we go back up just to, so it says it would connect the west entrance and north exiting trail loop to the observation structure in the center of the Broad Cove Nature Trail Platform 5. So it might just not be depicted, but there will be, and that, well, actually, that's the high point and that's all stone, so that might not necessarily be boardwalk. The boardwalk will just allow you to get to platform
To
5.
get to the stone.
Okay,
And then this would go in a northerly direction, to the existing trail in the upper.
that makes sense. So the green line is depicting what is, or is the proposed, potential wooden boardwalk.
I'm not so sure about that. I can't see that as clear as I'd like.
That's how I would interpret it. But again,
Yeah, I think you're correct, the green line is the structure to be built. Boardwalk.
That's how I took it,
yeah, and I'm sure what I heard, Mr. Cabal had reached out earlier just saying that he wouldn't be able to make it, and he did ask what our next meeting date was so that he could provide some more information.
I'm not sure, is this the rock outcropping?
Looks like it.
I think if you look down here, that you got the yellow pin, I think that is the rock outcropping.
Well, that's all, looks like, that's wood, looks to me like it's wooded.
Yep. That's where he shows platform 5 though, I'm not sure.
Well, I built the platforms,
Yeah,
so I know where they are. But there is supposedly, the Eagle Scouts put a platform on top of the, you shouldn't let me loose. An Eagle Scout project put a platform on top of that rock outcropping.
yeah.
So can you drop this down a little bit? I want to see the entrance. Boom, boom. Okay, if that's I guess that's, the trail should come to the outcropping and then go back into the, but this looks like woodland and it should look like marsh. I don't think this yellow pin is in the right place.
Okay, we can,
I think the yellow pin belongs over here.
okay. Yeah,
And the trail would come from there, from a parking lot, from there to here, and from here to the beginning of that woodland. Where's the railroad bed?
Yeah, we're good.
Go to the right.
Go to the right.
That's, yeah. That's the-
Here we go.
Yeah, the railroad bed is on, platform 2 is on the railroad bed.
okay.
Yeah, so it, I don't know.
I don't want to confuse you, I'm sure.
But, you know what's going on, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the purpose of having the design done is, well, we have clear delineation. So yeah, like I was saying, we had previously discussed with the last application that we did determine it was eligible. I did go back and look, because you are creating active and passive recreation, so it certainly is eligible. So, anyone want to make a motion to?
I'll make a motion to accept the eligibility for the broad code boardwalk project.
Do I have a
All right,
second?
second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we'll move on to the next step. We'll, and Jeff is aware, there's an additional form for funding that's a little bit more in depth. I mean, he gave us most of the information there, it's just kind of the formality of filling in that. So I'll make sure he gets that, and then in our next meeting, we'll discuss it more in depth.
So Jeff can do a much better job than I can.
You did fantastic.
Anyway, can I go home for supper now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Burnett, have a great evening.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
You as well.
Merry Christmas.
All right, so next up, we have review, discuss, and act, Community Preservation Coalition publication on community housing and our role in community housing. Paul and I have talked about this on a couple different occasions. I think everyone's aware of the fact that we haven't met our threshold for affordable housing. We know that there's quite a deficit there. And part of that is some of the roles we can play as the Community Preservation Committee in helping bridge that gap, and more so collaborating with, other entities, whether it's the planning board and DDIC and Serpent, but, controlling our own narrative to get to that point.
What I'm a little unclear of is, does Lincoln Village count or not?
Towards the.
Towards our 15% that everyone's trying to get to.
Well, it's 10.
It's 10,
Yeah.
sorry, 10.
Yep. It does count, but when you have, a town of 8,000.
Right, okay,
You know,
all right.
so
In
it doesn't,
the
I don't
past,
think
people
it.
said it didn't count.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, no,
Of course
certainly,
it counts, it
certainly
is
does.
affordable housing.
Correct.
Yeah, we've got approximately 3,000 housing units, and I believe 155 registered on the Affordable Housing Index. There was one property that I know was sold and was allowed to sell for above the affordable limit, so one fell off, which may not be reflected on the AHI currently. But yes, we're right around a little over 5% right now, so we're about halfway to the that safe harbor threshold on the AHI.
Like it says, it's literally impossible to ever get there, because every time you build one affordable, you build three more non-affordables.
Well,
Almost back where you started.
one driving force behind it, and this isn't necessarily a CPC issue, is it's more of a MBTA thing that's getting pushed on the town, is because with the rails, the commuter rail coming through certain areas, they want to see towns become more proactive in closing that gap, and it also affects the town's funding for certain things too. So if you're not showing that you're at least making an effort, like, yeah, it's hard to get to that 10%, but you need to at least make the effort to do something. And kind of more so on where the CPC comes into this is just ways that we can bridge that gap a little bit. I know a couple things that I'll share this all with you, which is, and I had shared it with Paul because he had asked the question about a month ago. It was the affordable housing guidebook that the coalition puts out, which is really good, and it gives some examples of different ways that we can contribute. One that really stuck out with me that I read, and I don't remember specifically what town it was, but there was an opportunity, and it kind of just brought a few different groups together. There was a historical home that someone purchased, and under the agreement that it would be repurposed into affordable housing units, and I think they also, another town did it with the church, is the CPC could contribute some funding to rehabilitate that, because one, you're preserving a historical resource, and you're also creating affordable housing. And it's, I think, in my mind anyway, it's a nice way to chip away at it, because, I mean, it might not seem like a lot, but if you had, large enough housing, you could create 4 affordable housing units. You're one step closer to the 10%, you restore, preserve a resource.
So also saving land at the same time by utilizing buildings that were
Already
utilized
exist.
and-
Correct. So I think that was just kind of the discussion I wanted to start. And I think one thing I'll add to this, we will have a community housing rep starting in January. Adele Collard is gonna come back. So we will have someone to represent that group. But I think, all of us collectively, Pat with historical, and even Dan with planning might hear things that come up, is like, if there's a piece of property that becomes available, at least we can kind of put it on our radar and, have that, because we certainly could approach, someone from historical could approach, the building owner and say, would you be interested in this, because we can contribute. And it also is a nice way for us to contribute without a large ask, because I mean, with the amount of money that we collect every year, even with our matching funds, we're not gonna build an affordable housing project using CPC funds. It's just not realistic, but it would be a good way to, check off a couple of boxes using the funding that we do have.
Not to go too deep around down, housing as a discussion, but I just always unclear, do group houses count towards affordable housing? Because the town has, I think, more than most houses. There's several, but do they count towards that? Is that where the project name?
Don't know. I would probably say, Mr. Hall might have a little bit of information on this. I would almost say no, because typically the residents of those programs are not paying
That's correct.
a rent. It's, state subsidized housing, so it's, you're not creating it's not affordable because they're not necessarily paying to live there. But I'm not sure who we would ask that question to.
Like rental property.
Yes, that is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some other things you can do with, there's rent assistance. I brought this up with a department head meeting, because we were talking about, how, increases in our taxes, the most vulnerable being, mostly the seniors. So if there is a senior citizen who doesn't meet the thresholds too, we could create an application process to do rent assistance. Can't do mortgage assistance or tax assistance, but if they are a renter, because I feel like we typically tend to sit on the community housing reserve. With the outside of the Lincoln Village electrical project, the CPC typically hasn't funded a bunch of community housing projects. So that might be something, if somebody needs a couple extra $1,000, it really doesn't put a dent in what we have reserved, and we can help somebody, stay. So I think that's something that we can think a little bit more about when we do our annual public meeting. We can make that a part of it, maybe even the residents of Lincoln Village, we could advertise to them that, we have this program available. One kind of little piece of that too, and I talked to, and he couldn't be with us tonight either, but I talked to Jonathan Gale about it because he used to be part of the 40B committee. You really need to do programs like that. You really need an active and, successful 40B committee to kind of facilitate that. Like, we should not be essentially creating the application process and taking in applications or speaking with residents that need the assistance. It would be the 40B committee who does it, and then they would come back to us and say, we have, X number of residents who could really use rent assistance. So that's something that's been talked about in town, about revitalizing the 40B committee. So I think that's something else, maybe in the next meeting when Jonathan's back with us, we can kind of delve into it a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, can I offer a comment?
Absolutely.
I did notice in the Dayton Digest that came out, the bi-monthly newsletter, that actually, ironically, is very good timing, because it was just noted in that newsletter that the town has awarded a $40,000 grant towards a housing production plan. And as that begins to kick off, I won't be surprised if the Board of Selectmen or Town Administrator's Office kind of begin to assemble folks to a focus group sample, get feedback from, pursuant to that. And the fact that we're talking about this and discussing it and beginning to familiarize ourselves with some of the use cases for the affordable housing funds within CPC, I think that would be a good thing to proactively communicate to the Town Administrator's Office that we're looking into now, because maybe we can kind of create some synergy, as that plan is just in its infancy right now.
Absolutely, that's a great point. I think too, having a housing representative back with us is another person that we can kind of, each one of us kind of have our own separate role. So it'd be, great. And I know Jonathan has quite a bit of expertise with, 40B. He's been involved with that for a long time. And he has a good relationship with some of the representatives in the area who tend to have expertise in that. So maybe we can have Jonathan and Adele work together to formulate that relationship with the administrator's office and be part of that plan, and then kind of report back to us with how we can help. So. And
I did have a couple of other takeaways, if that was okay.
Absolutely.
I've finished reading through the plan this evening, and I'd strongly encourage everybody to take a look at it, because it's funny when we think about these as being fairly restricted funds. I was blown away at the versatility that there is in these funds. Just a few of the standouts, as Kevin mentioned, that there's the rent assistance between a subsidized and a market rate. There's multiple usages where you can leverage historical and open space, as you said. One of the things I thought was interesting, not that I'm proposing that this would necessarily be a great idea, but just as food for thought, we do have the ability to borrow as well for CPC. And if we were to borrow on CPC, they are general obligation debts, but the debt service is paid exclusively with CPC funds. So in the future, theoretically, if you were to borrow for something that had multiple use case, based on my understanding of the law, you would actually be able to utilize funds from both in order to service the debt on any bonds that you issued to a project that had a multiple use case. Some other things that I thought were pretty cool were that one of the things I really did not know is that you can actually provide up to $20,000 directly to a homeowner for the construction of an in-law residence, as long as it's going to be used for a qualifying purpose. So as we begin to have these conversations and start to identify, what types of communities we want to serve with these funds as we explore these, under the law, we have to be careful of what's called disparate impact, which is disparate impact is if something were to, even if you're not trying to actively discriminate on the basis of a protected category, if you are in fact, if we had a local preference that was, say, overwhelmingly in favor of just 55 and up, I'll just use as an example. If more than 70%, the CPC uses allow up to 70% of houses created with CPC funds to do what they call local preference funds, which is restricted on a category like age, veteran status, something like that. So as long as you don't exceed 70%, you actually can have a local preference where you kind of serve a specific segment of the community based on the needs. And I was thinking that we could probably, if we begin to kind of network with other departments and boards within towns, the Board of Assessors would be able to give us really great feedback because they process lots of abatements and exemptions for folks on the basis of disability, age, financial hardship, veteran status, things like that. There's a lot of different abatements and exemptions, and that they could provide some really valuable feedback. One of the other things I really noticed as well is that you can provide, you can defray mortgage and loan costs, and you can actually provide payments directly to certain approved developers who are going to engage in rehabilitation. And that would allow certain units that would qualify as in the affordable housing index based on that unimproved value. That could allow somebody to come in, purchase it at the lower price, and then rehabilitate it while still qualifying as an affordable housing unit. Just looking through my notes real fast, there was something else that I thought was really cool as well. The local initiative program allows us to, let me see, I just took a note on that because that was one of the things that I wanted to hit on real fast was, sorry, my computer's freezing up on me, I apologize. But basically the fast takeaway was that we can provide affordable housing funds to anyone who makes less than 100% of our adjusted median income. And they only qualify on the affordable housing index if we serve communities or populations that are below 80%. Doesn't necessarily mean we can't, but only if they are an affordable housing unit that is sold or rented to someone who is at 80% of the AGI or below, those will count. And like I said, we do have the ability to borrow as well, but it's our responsibility to make sure that we allocate funds for the debt service payment when we do those. But yeah, that was one. Oh, I know. The last thing that I wanted to mention as well was that one of the things that I was reading about is that these can be combined with construction renovation loans for folks as well. So we can provide assistance to people who are taking out construction and renovation loans, which will allow them to purchase the home at the lower value that would qualify as affordable housing and then approve it. And so that might be one of the things that we want to pick the brain of as well as somebody who's knowledgeable in those loan programs, like the Fannie Mae Homestyle Loan or the FHA 203K construction renovation loan. So long story short, for restricted funds, when you really delve into this program and all the allowable uses, they're really anything but restrictive. There's some really cool and creative uses in this report, and I'd strongly encourage everybody to take a look.
Yeah, I agree like wholeheartedly that the community housing portion of it is like the least restricted of the restricted. That too, I mean, if we start seeing too, we got to keep in mind too, like when we do our yearly allocations too, like if we start to see more of a need for this, the 10-10-10 is the minimum, but we certainly could take a larger portion of what we're putting into the unrestricted and shift it to a category that has more of a need too. So we can keep that in mind. I did like the point that Paul brought up also too about there is a portion of it where you can do a buy down. And this is where something where we'd have to almost have you know, we could have a conversation even with the building commissioner to take a look at. If you have someone that's coming in and trying to, say, flip a house in Dayton, we could actually offer a buy down on that to make it an affordable unit too. So the person that's, you know, turning the house over is not gonna lose their profits, but we're creating, you know, one piece at a time, affordable housing, as opposed to having this, you know, push of developments, which we all know that everybody, you know, is against developments in this town, so it's kind of a nice way to show that we're still making an effort without.
And it's funny, before you had actually sent this out, I was driving home the other night thinking about this, like, about all the developments and how we could do affordable housing or other housing in the town without taking up all the precious land that we have in the town. And there's so many homes and so many pieces of property that could be revitalized and used different uses that kind of, you know, developers come in, they see an old farmhouse and they're like, oh, well, I'm just gonna tear it down and 4 pieces, you know, 4 other houses on the property instead of revitalizing it. And I think that's a way to prevent that from happening and keep the resources in the town.
I didn't look into where you've been referencing, but I'm sure there were case studies there, because I imagine timelines, given that all CPC funding is at town meeting, special town meeting, usually town meeting, timelines are like really difficult in terms of implementing things like this, because you're approving money at an annual basis for things that are going, you know, real estate in particular.
Yeah.
It's just trying to match those.
You could have to wait up to a year.
Exactly, yeah, just matching those 2 goals can be, I imagine, very difficult.
Yeah, no, that is a good point, that you're kind of creating a little bit of a, I'm sure somebody wants to move on, you know, project, they're not gonna
Wait for us.
wait for us.
Yeah.
You know, there's actually, ironically, there's a note actually in this report about a workaround for that, where as a town meeting action at a vote of the legislative body, the town actually could vote to utilize the moving of CPC funds from the affordable housing portion of the CPC fund into a an affordable housing trust, which would be able to expend it on a less restricted basis. Again, I'm not you know, pushing that necessarily, because but I'm just saying that actually there actually is a mechanism in this report for being able to work around the fact that the town meeting style of government only gives you a couple of bites at the apple per year. So there actually is a mechanism in the report to overcome that hurdle as well.
Right, and that ties back into the importance of having, you know, an active 40B committee. Because that's exactly, I remember reading that as well, that you could have yearly allocations that go to that. And I mean, we can have that conversation if we get to the point where that community housing fund is just growing so much that it makes sense, even if it's, you know, 10,000, you know, just put 10,000 a year, it's still gonna grow by what the minimum of 10%. You know, because I think that right now is sitting at 51,000. So, you know, there's no projects, and even like I have my own opinions about Lincoln Village that we won't get into. But if we don't have other projects, I mean, we could certainly make sure that we're being proactive in pushing this and putting this aside. And we also have the capability too, that, like we've said earlier, in the language of when we do write a warrant article giving any specific group or project funding about the returning of funds, we could also have that same thing too, where, you know, if it's put into the Affordable Housing Trust, and if it's not utilized within 2 years, it goes back to, you know, such and such. So we can always protect ourselves and leave ourselves a back door to bring it back into this, you know, CPC, you know, accounts if needed. So anybody have any? I'll share this whole handbook, like Paul, I sat there and read it when it first popped up in the emails from the coalition. I also too, just so everyone knows, I sent an updated roster with all of our, you know, correct contact information to the coalition, so everyone should get that like, because he kind of sends out, it's either, you know, depending on what's going on, sometimes it's bi-weekly or monthly, that we get like almost like a newsletter from the coalition that shares kind of what they're doing. That's how this popped up, kind of refreshed it in my mind, besides having conversations with Paul So it kind of lets us know, like on a statewide level, kind of what's the hot CPA thing going on right now. So you guys should get a little bit more of that information, and this is kind of, it's actually really good usually reading for a guidebook. Like Paul said, it really gives you a deeper understanding of what we can use that funding for, so. Does anybody have anything else they want to ask, comment, add to that? Public input?
Actually, thank you.
All right.
This last discussion was exciting. But I have a couple questions. And one of them is a challenge. Because as Kevin probably knows better than most of the members on this committee, CPC up until 2 years ago wasn't as stable and as ambitious as this group seems to be. We have a lot of misinformation about public housing being spread out in the community. We heard some of it on the radio yesterday.
We did?
I was on WBBF yesterday.
Okay.
And with that being said, your path to success will be enhanced by clearing up the misinformation, but also having a strategic plan how, one, that information will be accurately presented and who will be presenting it. And the second issue, this is a human effort, a huge undertaking. And bringing 40B in, revitalizing, seems like have to. Before CPC gets in deep and maybe become, with all the other projects that you're working on, to reach out to other groups. You mentioned planning to come up with a coalition to go forward as a team.
Yeah, you certainly want to be on the same page, and I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of planning, but it seems to be that a lot of, the public input that happens at planning board meetings is very, we want to move away from development, so I think most planning board members would be on board with trying to chip away at community housing versus.
Yeah, I can't speak as a general rule, but
Right.
I mean, there's a general sentiment of most people in town that adding more development, with cookie cutter houses, chopping down the trees is not the ideal path forward to solve problems.
Yeah, I think having 40B active too is important, just because it shows that we do care about, that portion of our community. I think as soon as you say 40B, we think about new people coming into the community, but there's people living in our community now who are our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, who fall into 40B housing that need the support to stay here too. So it doesn't always have to be about creating new housing, like we said, even with the rental assistance program that we could create, again, that would be through the trust. It's a way to help keep people in our town. So, there's more to it than, I think everybody just gets scared that 40B is new, right? It's new housing, it's not, it's just a blanket statement for affordable housing in general.
The MBTA impact zone scared a lot of communities big time. And although Dayton is not directly involved in it, there is some legislative movement to involve the neighboring communities simply to meet the governor's goal of more 200,000 units of affordable housing in the next 10 years. But there's been some pushback by communities who are overwhelmed with the impact that it will have on its schools and police and fire. So as a result, as often happens with things, we go extremes. We get wicked conservative, wicked liberal. We're moving to the middle, but keeping in mind that we have an obligation and a legislative requirement to work towards that 10% of 40B. That's never going to go away. How quickly we get to it requires planning and wise planning.
No, absolutely, and that's why we wanted to talk about this, and, you know, Paul and I have talked on a couple different occasions, it's more about controlling the narrative, you know, and giving, you know, additional avenues to, you know, get close to that threshold. And it's, like you said, we're not gonna get to 10% overnight. We'll probably never get to 10%, we might not get to 10% ever.
Well,
But the state wants to see there's repercussions for not making an effort. And I think with anything in government, if you're not, you know, trying to progress in some instance, I mean, just like with, you know, if the historical commission wasn't working to do surveys and protect historical pieces, you wouldn't get the support from the state, you know, because we've seen reimbursements for the historical surveys. You know, if you weren't being proactive, you would lose all of that, so. It all, it's the same no matter what category it is, really. It's like a chat up there, but it's just all telling us he's gonna reconnect early in the meantime. Anybody have anything else? No? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Please show us a motion to adjourn.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Thank you all. I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And
Thank you all. Likewise, have a great one. Take care, and Merry Christmas, everybody.
Christmas.
so we are adjourned at 6:31.
So what was that radio program that you were on?
Oh, WBBF in Taunton,
BBF?
WVB.
Oh.